When explorers venture into the Earth's most inhospitable landscapes, they often imagine the glory of standing where no human has stood before. Yet, what happens when this ambition turns into a grueling ordeal, pitting man against the most extreme elements? In 1953, an intrepid group of climbers set their sights on the ultimate prize, the summit of Mount Everest, the highest point on the planet. But as they soon discovered, reaching the top of the world would demand more than just skill. It would require unimaginable grit and perseverance. This is the perilous quest of the 1953 Everest expedition. By the spring of 1953, the idea of reaching the summit of Mount Everest had captured the imagination of the climbing world. After the first British attempt in 1921, the mountain had pushed back at least 10 major expeditions and 2 reckless solo efforts. However, following the 1950 discovery of a southern route through Nepal, a country that had recently opened its borders, a new path to the summit had been identified. This route, later known as the Yellow Brick Road in the 1990s, offered a potential way to the top, but the challenge remained formidable. In 1952, the Swiss seemed poised to make history. An ambitious Helvetic team, which included the legendary mountaineer Raymond Lambert, had climbed to the South Col, a critical point on the route to the summit. From there, Lambert and his Sherpa companion, Tenzing Norgay, pushed to 8,598 meters on the southeast ridge, just 250 meters below the summit, before they were forced to turn back. No one had ever climbed higher. Despite numerous attempts, the summit of this mythical mountain remains out of reach, as if still reserved for the gods. Determined once for all, the British launched a meticulously planned assault on Everest in the spring of 1953. This time, they recruited Tenzing Norgay, now 38 years old, as the chief Sherpa, or Sirdar. Previous British expeditions had been notable but somewhat informal, with little of the professionalism that marked this attempt. Sir John Hunt, a military officer and a skilled organizer, led the charge with a clear strategy: get there as fast as possible, with as much force as possible. This philosophy aligned perfectly with Hunt's disciplined, military approach. Among the climbers was a 33-year-old New Zealander named Edmund Hillary. Although not yet a knight, Hillary was already known for his climbing prowess. It was his 4th expedition to the Himalayas in just 2 years, and he was in peak physical condition, noted Band, a fellow climber. The icy peaks of New Zealand had served as an ideal training ground for the Himalayas, and Hillary quickly established himself as a key player by leading the team through the treacherous journey. The ascent, however, was anything but smooth. The team faced logistical setbacks, issues with altitude acclimatization, and problems with experimental oxygen equipment that slowed their progress considerably. They spent 12 arduous days retracing the Swiss route up Lhotse, struggling with the difficult ice, something the British had less experience with. Desperate, Hunt began to doubt whether the team would reach the South Col in time. On May 21st, the team finally arrived at the South Col, a vital stage in the climb. This delay was worrying, as the monsoon snow could arrive as early as June 1st. These seasonal heavy snowfalls increase the risk of avalanches, which can occur without warning and sweep away everything in their path. The thick layers of fresh monsoon snow can also conceal crevasses, deep cracks in the glacier that pose deadly risks to those who inadvertently step into them. Finally, the onset of monsoon weather often brings with it high winds and poor visibility, further complicating the climb and increasing the chances of fatal accidents. The arrival of the monsoon snow not only makes the ascent nearly impossible, but also transforms the mountain into a deadly trap, where every step could be the last. Despite time running out, on May 26th, the first summit attempt was made by Tom Bourdillon and Charles Evans. Despite a late start and problems with Evans's oxygen supply, the pair managed to reach the south summit at 8,748 meters, just 101 meters short of the top. Exhausted and facing dwindling oxygen supplies, they made the difficult decision to turn back. Tom always regretted that decision, recalled Michael Westmacott, Bourdillon's close friend from the 1953 team. 3 days later, on May 29th, Hillary and Tenzing set out for the summit. Tenzing was always a strong contender to make the final push to the summit. Hunt had always intended to include a Sherpa in one of the summit teams, to acknowledge their invaluable contributions. Tenzing, with his 6 previous Everest attempts, was the most experienced local climber on the team. His inclusion in the final push was both a recognition of his skill and an essential part of the expedition's success. The partnership between the two was largely a matter of circumstance, but it proved to be fortuitous. Setting out from a higher camp, and earlier than Bourdillon and Evans, Hillary and Tenzing reached the south summit around 9 a.m. But the hardest part of the climb was yet to come. Beyond the south summit, the ridge dips slightly before rising sharply to a 12-meter rock face, the final obstacle before the true summit. Scraping at the snow with his ice axe, Hillary wedged himself between the rock and an adjacent ice ridge to overcome this daunting barrier, which would later be known as the Hillary Step. At 11:30 a.m. on May 29, 1953, after an exhausting and freezing ascension, Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay stood on the summit of Mount Everest, 8,848 meters above sea level. The two men shook hands and warmly greeted each other. They stayed at the top for just 15 minutes, during which they both took in the most beautiful, impregnable, and exclusive panorama in the world. Hillary took a moment to reflect on the British climbers Mallory and Irvine, who had disappeared on the northeast ridge of Everest in 1924. "I looked around for any sign that they had reached the summit, but there was nothing," he later declared. As they started to descend, the first climber they encountered was George Lowe, a fellow New Zealander. Hillary's words to him would go down in history. "Well, George, we knocked the bastard off." These words have since become inseparably linked to the legacy of Everest's conquest, symbolizing the triumph of human determination over nature's greatest challenges. Their achievement caused a sensation, even after they left the region. When we arrived in Kathmandu, political issues arose, particularly from the Indian and Nepalese press, who wanted to ensure that Tenzing had been the first to reach the summit, Sir Edmund later recalled. They wanted to prove that Nepali and Indian climbers were just as capable as foreigners. We felt uncomfortable with the attention. John Hunt, Tenzing, and I met, and decided not to say who had reached the summit first. The pact remained secret for several years, until Tenzing revealed in his autobiography, Tiger of the Snows, that Hillary had been the first to step onto the summit. In the wake of their historic achievement, neither man could have anticipated the fascination and fervor that Everest would inspire. For Tenzing and me, it seemed unlikely that anyone would try the ascent again after our expedition, Sir Edmund later admitted. We were wrong. Their success opened the door for countless others to attempt the climb, but it also set the standard for what it meant to conquer the world's highest peak, an achievement that remains nowadays one of the ultimate tests of human endurance and spirit. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more perilous quests. Until next time, stay healthy, stay curious, and remember, the highest peaks are conquered by those who dare to dream and persist in the face of adversity.